Good evening, Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order for March 28th, 2022. And our first order is to call for a moment of reflection before we get into the rest of our agenda. So we'll take a moment now. All right, thank you very much. So first order of business is approval of the agendas. We have a consent agenda. Is anyone prepared to make a motion on our consent agenda? Councillor Monteith makes a motion. If there is no request to pull any information from the consent, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. On to the regular meeting agenda approval. We have had a request to add 2 new business items. One for AAPG, approval to attend the conference. And second will be a letter that we will be issuing to our fellow councillor, Van Hagenbos. That will be item 9. The in-camera item that is listed as legal will be removed. There will be an additional land item in camera that we will add. I believe that's the amendments that have been asked for. If there's no other changes, I'll request a motion from council to approve with the amendments. So moved. Thank you very much. Call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And we have an opportunity for the good of council. Does anyone have anything they would wish to share with the whole of council? Yes.
I do know that FCSS is starting I believe it's an Easter egg hunt, and they're in conjunction with Kids Family First. I'm not too sure the date. I believe it's the 9th or 8th on that weekend. So that will be at WA Day Gym. So that'll be a great thing for family to attend in town. And then also in addition, there is the community cleanup coming up next month. And I know there's a lot of planning going into place for that. So just wanted to make mention.
Thank you. Councillor Dressler.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to add in that on April 7th, there is a nice presentation that's being held via virtual on hate crimes and the threat to civilization. It was done through CAPG, which is our chiefs of police. And so anyways, if it's a webinar, so if anybody would like to join in on that, please let me know and I can CC you the link so you can register.
Very good, thank you very much. I did get an email this afternoon from our rural health practice community that's just trying to find their abbreviation. I keep forgetting it. Alberta Health Services, essentially saying they have accepted a candidate for a doctor in our community. So that was good news to hear today. So I think Lisa got that information as well. So they have two positions still vacant that they're recruiting for, but it seems like they're making progress. So that was good to hear. And on another note, I was able to meet with our Minister Doug Schweitzer today in Lethbridge. Alberta Southwest was invited to a discussion with Southgrow, just in their coordination with the province on economic development. So it was good to be able to attend that and to hear some of the things that they're working on, especially around Invest Alberta. Anyone else have something they'd like to share? Councillor Dressler.
Just wanted to also share too, that OSI has been doing online peer support. If those that do not know what OSI is, it's mental health for those that are frontline service workers, both for provincial and or federal. So you have the option where you can actually go and meet face to face with a mental health therapist, or you can do is join what is called a peer support group. So we do have several peer support groups that are available. And so one of the ones that's being done supports here for Southern Alberta for our veterans and those that are working frontline, which is also based with our Calgary group. So if there's anybody that is interested, if they wouldn't mind contacting me, and I'd be happy to share that link.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? If not, then we will move on to delegations, of which we have 2 tonight. And we will first invite our auditor, Calvin Scott, to be able to speak to us regarding our audit for 2021. Welcome, Calvin.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully this mouse will be close enough to get through. Not a problem. We'll go to the next slide. We'll get into what we're covering today. So this will be a click through on all of these ones. We will run through the independent auditor's report. We also go through the financial results. We'll run through a few of the notes to the financial statements. We'll look at some highlighted indicators of financial condition, which are some comparative graphs on how you compare to other municipalities. And in standard practice, we would say the management letter and post-audit letter would be in camera. However, we have no issues to bring to your attention, so there isn't a need to go in camera unless council would like to do so. First things first, the independent auditor's report. There's a clean opinion. Had it not been a clean opinion, you would have known prior to this point in time. You would have been aware of it. So the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. The independent auditor's report also says that management is responsible for the financial statements and you as council are responsible for the oversight of management. As auditors, we are responsible for identifying and assessing any material or risk of material misstatement. We need to understand the internal controls. We evaluate the policies and estimates and conclude on the going concern assumption, so your ability to continue on into the future. And we also evaluate the presentation of the financial statements. And because we had no issues with those, again, there was a clean opinion for the year. And now we'll jump into the numbers. So we have a summary of the revenues for the year. On an overall basis, the revenues decreased by $18,000. So a very small change in revenues from the prior year when we're looking at a $7.6 million revenue. Taxes were up by about $30,000 from the prior year, and that was just as budgeted, so we can see that we budgeted for that increase. The user fees, although they only decreased by $73,000, the makeup was different. So in the prior year, there was about $500,000 worth of land sales, and in the current year, there was only about $40,000 worth of land sale revenue. The additional revenue changes that made up the difference. There was additional filming revenues in there, and there was also water rate increases that made up that difference from the $500,000 of land sales in the prior year. Government transfers were up about $100,000, so the most grant and community partnership grants came in this year and increased that. On the investment side, we were down about $141,000 of investment income. With rates being down, we've seen investment income down standard across all municipalities and all entities in general. Franchise fees are up about $30,000, and this related to Fortis revenues. And there was a gain on sale the current year. This relates to the town office and the tourist center, tourist information center. And the gain on sale of those assets netted to about $32,000. So again, overall, not a significant change, about $18,000 on the revenue side. On the next slide, we'll look at the expenses. And it's a new format, exciting changes to these financial statements. We can see that there's headings here, and this is a recommendation by Alberta Municipal Affairs, so we've made that change for you. With those new groupings, on an overall basis, the expenses are up about $373,000. That's about a 4% increase on the expenditure side. Some of the changes here, we can see that admin was up about $184,000. This included the election costs during the year. There was also some mediation costs, some asset management costs that were incurred, as well as a write-off of some property taxes that are included in here. Roads were also down, roads, streets, walks, and lighting, about $200,000. The prior year, we had a loss on disposal of assets of about $100,000, so we'll have that decrease as well. There was less snow removal and sanding this year, some lower wages, and less repairs and maintenance. So all around good decreases on the road side to bring that down $200,000. Subdivision expenses were up about $120,000, and this is mainly going to be the cost of the removal of the tourist center. There's also a traffic impact assessment that was included in here. The other large change that would have happened this year would be parks. That was up about $280,000, parks and recreation. And that's mainly due to the pool being open. So we're going to have increased operating costs there, as well as amortization on that asset. So a non-cash cost, but it would have increased there as well. So overall for the year, we have an increase in expenses of about $373,000. Now, when we look at this together, not a big change in revenue, increase in those expenses. So we have a deficiency of revenue over expenditures this year of about $709,000 as compared to $317,000. And this is from operations. We then add in the capital revenues that occurred this year, so about $1 million of capital revenues and some capital donations that came in, and it leaves the town with a surplus of $455,000 this year. So these numbers include operating revenues as well as operating expenses. And then we include the amortization expense, which is a non-cash. We include the capital revenues, but we don't actually include the capital expenditures here or the repayment of debt or debt coming in. So we'll take you to the next slide where we can kind of give you a better idea of what that looks like. I try to break down the difference between the combined, the capital and the operating here. And if you can see on this slide, we show an operating surplus, if you will, once we remove all of those capital items of about $1 million, and we show capital loss of about $572. So that's where we get the combined surplus of about $455,000. So it gives you a little better look at what the operating surplus was versus the capital. The financial statements changed back in 2018. We used to actually see the split of capital and operating, but now they combine them to make it much more easy to read and understand. Which is not the case whatsoever. And you can see also at the bottom here that there was an operating surplus after we adjust for other items of about $600,000 for the year, and that was transferred into reserves, leaving a final surplus, true surplus of about $1,000 after those transfers occurred. The financial statements you'll see on a regular basis are much better as far as understanding what those amounts are. So this is the formality of having to go through these, but the information you get on a monthly basis is far more understandable and makes a lot more sense when coming down to these surpluses in comparison to budget. Now we'll look at the financial assets. So we can see that the financial assets are down about $3.3 million from last year. So cash is down about $7 million. $3 million was moved into long-term investments during the year, and about $8 million was spent on capital assets. $3 million of that was funded by debt. We also paid off some payables and have some grants that came in this year that were unspent, which increased it. But on an overall basis, $7 million on the cash decreased. Trade receivables are up about $200,000. And that's mainly because of what was the federal gas tax grant, still receivable at the end of the year, and that is now the Canadian Community Benefit Fund, if I recall correctly. CCBF is the new acronym for that. The land held for resale, we can see an increase there of about $95,000, and that includes the land swap that happened during the year, and the Brindy amount also increased that. On the liability side, or what the town owes, that's up about 2.3 million. We can see the major change for that is going to be new debt for the industrial development. That's up from 4.3 million to 6.7 million. We also have some deferred revenue, which would have increased this year. So that is going to be unspent grants, so externally restricted amounts that are specified for certain projects, and those have yet to be spent. And we'll run through the note on those. Accounts payable are down about $325,000, and that's just a matter of timing of payments during the year. So financial assets, the net financial assets, if we were to take what the town owns and what they owe as of December 31st, we can see that that actually decreased from 10.4 million to 4.8 million this year. So if you had to pay off all of your liabilities right now, you would still have $4 million left over, is what this is saying, as compared to 10. But that's because of the investment that we've made this year in capital. On the next slide, we'll just look at the inventory for consumption. Not a significant change there. Tangible capital assets. As I said, there's about 8 million of additions this year. So we're looking at the utility upgrade, finished phase 1, started phase 2, and that's about $2.4 million. The pool was finished, that came to about 1.6 million this year. And then there was engineering construction for Manning Avenue, which is about 1.4 million, and 9th Street was about 1.8 million. So some significant capital investment this year led to this big increase in the tangible capital assets. When we look at the accumulated surplus, we have a small increase there. Our surplus for the year was $455,000. We can see that unrestricted hasn't changed a whole lot. We've used up a lot of those internally restricted surpluses or reserves that were there, spent our reserves this year on tangible capital assets, and you can see the equity intangible came up. So even though our net financial assets decreased, on an overall basis, the accumulated surplus increased mildly. So we've invested significantly in ourselves, spending cash into physical assets. Essentially, that conversion happened this year. So still in a good place, even though the net financial assets have come down. One good thing to note too is that your reserves all are cash covered. So if we take the unrestricted surplus, the internally restricted reserves, plus our deferred revenue, all of that is now covered by cash and investments, or not now still covered by that. So you haven't put away money that you don't have, which is always something we like to look for. The next slide simply shows the reserve balances, just for your awareness at the end of the year. The major change here that we'll see the special purposes on the capital side is decreased from 5.2 to $1.5 million this year. The next slide will just show your debt limit. So we can see that overall the debt limit itself didn't change significantly. That's a result of overall revenues on the operating side not changing significantly. The total debt limit is calculated at 1.5 times those operating revenues. So not a big change there. The total debt itself went up from 4.3 to 6.7. And if the town were to get more debt, we always recommend that we normalize those numbers when calculating the debt limit. Your operating revenues can contain one-time revenues, donations, one-time grants. So to make sure to look at those and normalize before getting any further debt. Now we get into the comparatives. So we'll have some overall big swings. So when we look at these numbers, there's 4 bars or colors that show up. So the blue is going to be the town numbers themselves. The red will be the town average of all towns, and there's 105 towns that make up that that comparative balance. That's all towns in Alberta. The comparative size, which is the comparative town average, the green line, is going to be made up of about 18 towns. So this is going to be other towns that have a population within 25% higher or lower of the town of Fort Macleod. And then the any type line, or the purple line, is going to be any municipalities with the same comparative average of 25% higher or lower. But this would include MDs, villages, cities, anything that has a comparable, whether it's a town or not, the comparable balance. There's about 29 municipalities that make up that comparative. So that's just for information purposes. So when you're looking at this, you know what those comparatives are. The first comparative we'll look at is financial assets to liabilities. So as we discussed, the liabilities came up this year, having increased debt, and the financial assets decreased. So that's why we'll see a significant drop, but still above the majority, the comparable average of towns. So the town started off with a significant number or significant amount of cash, and even though that's been invested and down, and we have more debt, we're still on a comparative basis above the comparative average. So still looking in good position there. On the current ratio, so when we take our assets in, we still have $12 million sitting in the current side. So we did spend some, but we're high. And this removes the debt. So if we pull out that long-term debt portion of this, still in a good position, still higher on an average basis than most municipalities. So still looking healthy with this indicator. On the debt to revenue percentage, we can see a significant increase here. So revenues did not change significantly from the prior year. However, the town took out a couple $1 million worth of debt, which threw this way up on a comparative basis. Not surprising in the first year of taking out debt. We'll run to the next one. So this is own source revenues to taxable assessment. Generally, we've been here, we've been above average on a regular basis. So with reduction in expenses and an increase in the taxable assessment, we can see that we've dropped right down into in line and still above where we've been at. The electrical distribution in the past would have kept us in a much higher level here. And so we see this starting to normalize in line with the comparable averages. The infrastructure investment, so we can see a lot of changes on the graphs this year in comparative. So when you spend $8 million on assets in a year, we're going to see a significant investment in comparison. So last year is still a little bit higher than the comparative average, but this year a significant investment is going to pull that way up from where the comparatives would be. No surprises on that one whatsoever. The reserves to total accumulated surplus. So in the past, there was significant reserves resulting from the police college that had come in cash that had been internally restricted. We can see that we spent a lot of those reserves this year, bringing us down, but still a healthy reserve balance in place and above on the comparative side of things. So still in a healthy financial position. And the last of the indicators would be the accumulated surplus available for future use. So again, this is coming down with the spending of reserves on capital, but still ahead of the comparative basis. There's still some money left to spend, still cash covered reserves and an unrestricted surplus in place. So even though we've had a significant investment in assets this year and we've taken on new debt, we're still in a healthy financial position with those cash covered reserves in place. And these would be the other two things that we need to bring to your attention, that there was nothing to bring to your attention from a management letter perspective. We scrutinize these numbers in depth and have no significant issues whatsoever to bring to your attention. And thank you again to your team for being wonderful to work with. Always great. As we were talking with Chris earlier, we're pretty much fully remote on this audit. It's wonderful. We don't have any significant issues. I did meet with someone last week, a different municipality ahead of you. So usually the town of Fort Macleod is my first meeting of the year, but the MD of Exshaw beat you, the MD of Bighorn up in Exshaw. So it was a preliminary meeting though. So you're the first finalized meeting that we're having. In the post-audit letter, we noted no illegal acts or fraud. We had no disagreements with management and no difficulties encountered during the audit at all. And the last slide we'll show you is just some emerging issues. These are going to be the same as last year. There are some changes coming to financial statement concepts, so purchase intangibles. This won't affect you, nor will the next one for foreign currency and investments. The asset retirement obligation will have some work to do in the future. So there'll be some changes coming with this one. Assessing what assets may have a retirement obligation, we're going to have to record that. Some of those things might be in the past where asbestos may exist in a building that you currently have. In the past, if you weren't going to be remediating that or making any changes, you wouldn't have to record a liability until such time that you were doing the renos or changing anything. Now that would say that we have to look at that, try to determine the costs and estimate a liability for it. So there will be some work in assessing it and determining what, if any, liabilities exist in the future. And the last couple, the revenue changes for exchange transactions and financial statement presentation, neither should have any significant effect on the town whatsoever. And that's the end of it. Time for all of your questions.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, thank you to the staff as well for their work in getting this done. That's appreciated. Did anyone have questions on the financials? Councilor Dressler?
My question was on there with the retirement of certain things. Does that also include lands as well? For with that may or potentially have environmental impacts that are unknown to us without doing an environmental assessment?
Potentially, yes. So if there's going to be some, if we knew of some unremediated wells potentially that may be in the area, yes. If there's lands that we're unaware, I wouldn't suggest that we need to do a full environmental assessment of all lands and owned to be able to determine that. But if there was anything that you were aware of at this point in time, we definitely have to make note of that and determine what it was.
Okay. No, I was just curious because of the old RCAF Air Force and those lands out there are still having old tarmacs and other things like that. And I've seen in the past in other communities having issues with that. So I just was curious into that. Thank you.
And I would think if we know about lands like that, we would definitely be looking at it and assessing it if there was a potential liability. So,
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Councilor Monteith?
You indicated that the changing of the revenue and expenses, et cetera, were, the format was approved by municipal affairs. Is that correct?
the current year change as far as the display of the presentation of the, yes, so the change came on the expense side, not on the revenue side yet.
Okay, well, that's great for municipal affairs. I'm not so sure it's great for taxpayers, because this is less understanding, because it doesn't break out things by department, for one thing. It lumps all these things together. We show expenses for these things, but we don't break out revenue. So if you're just looking at the statement, you have no idea what these departments did.
I agree completely with you. The net debt presentation comes solely from Alberta Municipal Affairs, and I would agree with you that it's very difficult to understand these statements without a significant amount of other information to support those numbers. And that's why I say that on a monthly basis, council gets far better information than what I'm presenting to you today because of the prescribed format of these financial statements.
Thank you. Councilor Dressler, your last question.
Thank you. One of the other questions, now that I was just looking at my own personal notes, so anything under the National Fire Protection Agency, NFPA, equipment-wise, would that be also included in that retirement thing as well, of facilities, equipment?
There is a possibility, but I'd have to see the assessment itself.
Okay, no, I just was curious on that because there is a lifespan for equipment and then of course recertification, you know, like if they're putting this into place saying that you have to look at it as a retirement, and if we only see a lifespan of a piece of equipment is only a certain period of time, that kind of puts a community at a risk of having expenditures to replace equipment on an ongoing cost, and especially if it's can be recertified, but of course if EMG or municipal affairs says you have to put a retirement policy in place, that kind of really puts a hand behind somebody's back.
Generally on the equipment side, the useful life of that asset's assessed and then we amortize it over the useful life. So we wouldn't have to reassess on any of the equipment itself. So I think the equipment would be fine.
Okay.
Generally would fall into land and buildings that we'd have the issue with.
Very good. I did have one comment on the submission for municipal comparison. The last chart was population, and I think there's an error in the chart.
Yes, the population doesn't work, and municipal affairs no longer provides population changes. So that no longer, and that's why I didn't have it in the presentation. So they don't provide that stat anymore. So when we're importing data from Alberta Municipal Affairs, it doesn't come in correctly. Yes. So that you are correct in the fact that that has not changed and doesn't work
Thank you.
properly.
I was just hoping we could illustrate that our chart is growing comparables to others, but that's good. Any other questions on our financial audit? No. Well done, Kevin. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
We'll have a consideration of your presentation in our next portion of the agenda. I don't think you need to stay, but that's your call.
Wonderful. I will get back to work then. Thank you very much for having me. I
Right.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Very well, thank you. All right, next up we have a delegation from Highway 3 Twinning Development Association. So we'd like to welcome them to the stand. And so, thank you for coming. I don't think, quite sure you know most of us on council, correct, Victoria and Blair? No? Either way, welcome to the town of Fort Macleod. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you. My name is Victoria. I'm with the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association. I'm the Director of Advancement, and thank you for having us here with you today so that we can give you an overview of anybody who's new and hasn't heard about us and why you're supporting us. And so I'll get started. How do you want me to do the forward? Next page. So the association was actually formed in the 70s. It's gone through a few names. It helped to design the crow in the crow's sign in the Highway 3 sign. It started out as a more tourism group, and then it migrated into an economic development group, and then lastly coming into its current form as the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association. It has incorporated all the communities along the southern Alberta, and to advocate on behalf of twinning Highway 3 from BC to Saskatchewan. That has resulted in the twinning of Highway 3 between Fort Macleod and Tabor. Our board currently includes every municipality between Medicine Hat and the Crow's Nest Pass, with the exception of MD, Willow Creek, and Barnwell. Next page, please. What are the stages to twinning? So it's interesting that people believe that we can have twinning or have the highway asphalt going down right away. That process is not what happens, and most of our council members are aware of that since you work municipally. So we currently have the Piikani Nation as the only area that hasn't had its functional planning study completed. Those functional planning studies were completed as a freeway system. The Highway 3 Twinning Development Association is actually currently looking at the twinning as a highway, just twinning the existing highway. So if you're going on the website and you see the big interchanges and these types of things, this is not currently what we're lobbying for. Step 2 is there's several locations that do require some environmental impact planning that would take a little bit longer than the typical process. Step 3, engineering and design, is the firm road construction, the design of the road, and the details for RFP for who will actually be constructing the road. The 4th step is utility and right-of-way, including the land purchases and location and relocation of utilities. And a lot of people don't understand that mostly the government does not want to take the land. They would rather see some additional negotiation and make sure all the landowners are happy. And that would be this current government. The last step is, yay, land clearing and asphalt. Next page. From the government perspective, the government has had some concerns about not all of the communities being on board with their plan of where the freeway system would be placed. Additionally, as I mentioned, the government doesn't want to force communities. They want to see consensus before any design investment. The total cost to twin is very variable depending on the region. I've ballparked it at the 7.2 billion, based on what we understand as the 4 to 8 billion per kilometer. And as we know, the province of Alberta does need has a lot of road projects that need to be completed, and those are all completed based on their priorities. So our lobbying efforts are to keep Highway 3 twinning as a high priority for this government. I think next page. I'm kind of reading this and I probably should skip through. I know you received this in advance, right? So we recently, in 2018, the board members of Highway 3 Twinning completed a strategic plan that's thought you should hire a director of advancement, which would be me, one individual person working part-time to lobby specifically on behalf of Highway 3 Twinning. And in that sense, we're able to have one individual person doing lobbying where the municipalities are going to lobby anyway. When you're meeting with government, you're lobbying for what you look for within your municipality. And then we have one lobbying on behalf of all of the municipalities along the corridor. With the financial, with the financial commitment of our communities, we have been able to continue to go forward and lobby and actually complete our second strategic plan and work plan. We just got underway, and our targets are to initiate a 2022 economic impact analysis, which is also underway. Now, next page, please. So, the big plan right now is to try to engage with community and industry stakeholders. A bit of a challenge with the pandemic was meeting with more businesses and having more businesses join our membership. Our membership is quite reasonable at $250 a year. We wanted to make it reasonable so that we could attract approximately 150 to 200 stakeholder businesses that are along the corridor. At that kind of figures, that would really help with the municipal support that we do get to run the association. So that is a big task for our current strategic plan, in addition to just making sure the citizens of Southern Alberta know who Highway 3 Twinning Development Association is, sign our petition, and spread the word. They know what we're doing, and they kind of get better clarity on how the twinning will occur. Some people think that the Tabor to Burdett section is not even happening because they're not seeing anything. So we have to inform them about what is happening in the background. So we have several trade shows we are currently doing. You may be aware, Home and Garden and the Ag Expo and the Crow's Nest Pass Leisure Show and the Medicine Hat. So we have a lot of that happening at the beginning of the year here, and we intend to also continue with our town halls, our virtual town halls. Next page, please. Oh, I think I was ahead of myself and covering all that already. The good news here is, as you can see, our 2022 twinning priorities for the association. Item number 4 is for Macleod Stage 1A. That will continue to be a lobbying item until the funding is actually in place and there's an agreement. So the board as a whole in Southern Alberta votes on behalf of what our priorities are. So this list is generated throughout all the municipalities along the corridor who are our members. Next page, please. So, yeah, actually, again, I'm ahead of myself because I'm not following my paper. So, I already covered the cost of twinning and economic stimulus for infrastructure projects. This is some of the things that we're discussing with government on lobbying. Stages and sections. We are now looking at, instead of asking the government to do the complete twinning from one side to the other, which is a lot of funding that they would need to provide, we are able to ask to have them do sections such as the Tabor to Burdett section. If they'll give it all to us, we're very happy to have that happen. The other item is that we're also lobbying the federal government right now, and it does look like there may be an opportunity for some federal funds on a cost share basis, and if we're able to get the federal funds in a lump sum to twin the entire corridor, certainly I'm assuming that the board would want to do that. Next page, please. So we're aligning with the government strategic economic priorities, which does change depending on which government is in place, and we would work to make sure we're in alignment, whichever government that is. Right now, we're going to be wanting to support economic development along the corridor, and we want to concentrate on safety for all travelers along the corridor. Next page, please. And this is just a list of some of the things we've accomplished since October 2019, which would be when the strategic plan really came into place. I think we're all pretty happy with the progress that we've made. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but our economic impact analysis RFP has been approved by our executive and is going to our board this Friday at our AGM. And we're really excited to see that move forward this year. Next page. What can you do? Well, other than just supporting us as you do as a municipality, if you know of businesses that are along Highway 3 and care about it, trucking companies, etc., suggest that they do join the association. We want a list of stakeholder businesses that we can show to this government who care enough to put $250 down a year to show their support. Also, follow us on Facebook, sign the petition if you haven't already done so, and share. Next page, please. And that's it. I am Victoria with Highway 320 Development Association, the Director of Advancement, and I did neglect to introduce my board member here. This is Mayor Blair Painter from Crow's Nest Pass. He is our secretary of our board, and I should turn the mic over to him.
Thank you, Worship and councillors, for having us here this evening and being able to present our presentation to you. I want to really thank you folks for your support of supporting Highway 3 Twinning and Development Association. Very important, as Veronica said. We only have a couple of municipalities along the route that aren't supporting us so far, and we're still definitely working in getting them on board as well. As you can see, we're not new. We've been out there since the 70s, and although our goals have changed through the years, we're still very active and very concerned about Highway 3. And as we receive more and more traffic volume on our highways, safety is of utmost importance. For our community, it was very important for us to establish a route for the twinning of Highway 3 in the future. As you can see, it's not on the list there, but we're hoping to bring it up to our community. So we've gone through numerous rounds of consultation with the province, with Alberta Transportation through the years. And just a couple of years ago, we did finalize a route. Not all of our community is happy. That's just how things work. But we do have an established route, so now we can plan ahead for the future. And I think that's really important for Macleod as well, getting that project done so you folks can plan ahead for the future. And I'm just going to open it up and see if you folks have any questions that I can answer.
Very good. Thank you both for coming. Mayor Blair, I was wondering if you could share a little bit how Highway 3's worked with your community regarding some of your issues going through.
Well, our community isn't like a prairie community. We're in the mountains, we're in a valley. We have to deal with a major highway, river, major rail lines, and of course a natural gas pipeline. We don't have a lot of area to move within our community. We've put some mitigation in place for the time being until actually the twinning happens with traffic lights in our community, and also Central Lane turning through the community of Frank. We do have constraints starting from the Frank slide because it is historic, and we just can't go in there with bulldozers and move everything. Plus, there's one portion of there that is actually designated as a graveyard. So that complicates things again. Then heading farther west, we have a really narrow point between Bluff Mountain and Turtle Mountain, which is going to be a real challenge because there again we have all those issues, the rail, the river, the highway, all in very, very tight proximity to each other. So it's going to be quite a challenge to get through there. The engineers are really struggling with that one right now, actually. And then when the highway gets to the community of Blairmore, it's actually going to, halfway through, it will veer off and go to the south. And then it will actually bypass the community of Coleman and then tie back into the existing Highway 3 just before we get to the Alberta-BC border. We've had a lot of discussion with our counterpart, the BC Highway 3 Association as well, realizing that we can bring the traffic through Alberta, but once it hits the border, we're back to those same kind of constraints again, and a lot more difficult to build highways in the mountains than it is out in the prairies. So they are working on making improvements on their side, widening bridges, widening and putting in passing lanes at every opportunity. Everybody realizes the volume of traffic on Highway 3. That particular port or entry into BC is one of the busiest ports in Alberta. So there's a huge amount of truck traffic and just pedestrian residential traffic that goes through there. It's been a struggle. You hear all kinds of things. You know, moving the highway out of your community makes your community safer, which means people will prefer to move to a community that's safe. You know, we've experienced that firsthand with the bypass starting from the east. When Bellevue was bypassed, our commercial area died. Coleman was bypassed. Same thing would happen in Coleman. When Blairmore was bypassed, the same thing happened in Blairmore. We have also made agreements with the province that they put in things in place to attract people to come into our community. And one can only hope that those things really will come to fruition and actually work. So. Yes, sir.
Councillor Monteith.
I'm just curious, out of that $7 billion for the widening, a good portion of it must be the Crowsnest Pass.
Yes, absolutely right. I've heard numbers where, you know, the cost from Saskatchewan right through to the Crowsnest Pass is the same amount as it is from Crowsnest Pass to through to the border. So, yeah, it's about half of this budget will take place in the Crows Pass.
Very well. Any other questions? Councillor Dressler?
I just find it kind of more of a question into logistical. When Alberta was always formalized on the Coquihalla Highway, they really kind of rejected looking at a northern route, which used to be the old Yellowhead Highway, which was for Edmonton to BC, and then of course the Crow's Nest Highway, Highway 3. And as a result, we've all seen now with the floods in BC that a major highway that was a corridor for moving product between Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba into BC was affected, and there was no secondary roads other than Highway 3. So that put on a lot of strain and stress on that highway. And of course, there were a lot of collisions and other things that happened during that stretch period while they were reopening the Coquihalla Highway. I think it's very important that the Alberta government see that there is an importance in logistics on highways, that they have to look at these other highways as a secondary route, but also make sure that they're maintained and safe, that goods can travel between the prairies into our coastal ports. It's kind of a shame that we don't look at it, especially when we have rail that also provides a lot of things. But again, the primary corridor is going along the Coquihalla through Cathedral. But yet the secondaries always take it when there's a washed out bridge, and they increase the rail travel going along with dangerous goods. So very good presentation, and I thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Was there a question? No, just comments. Okay, good. Well, thank you. Any other questions? Councilman Agbas?
Thanks for the presentation. I got two questions. At the beginning, when you were discussing the municipalities that we're all members, I just found it interesting that the municipality, the county or the MD that we're part of isn't. Is there a specific reason for that, or just you'd have to ask them? Because I'm not looking for.
I'll let Victoria take that question.
Well, it's interesting because we have had some conversation with members of council for MD of Willow Creek, but it's my understanding they're really tightening up their budget and really not doing any external associations at this time. So I think it's kind of an all or nothing situation as far as I understand. It's rather interesting. I think there's some desire, but I do think there's some restrictions for whatever is happening. And the financial, obviously the financial support is not, from a municipal perspective, not huge. But, when you need to cut back, I don't know. Colehurst used to also not be a member, and they came on board this year. So we're pretty proud to have Colehurst on board. There was a time in a period where the association didn't have much going on, and there wasn't a lot of progress being made. And I think some people felt a little cynical about making progress. That might play into it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I guess the next question is, you said the stage 1A was priority number 4. What do you think the town can do? Like we've tried writing letters and such, what do you think from a board perspective, what do you think the town can do to, either bump that up to a 1 that would be from the board side, the members, but lobbying the government? Is there, I feel like we've kind of hit a brick wall with that, and it's on the unfunded list. Well, it could stay there forever, but what do you think we can do to get their attention?
It's a good question, because I know that I will just say that you as a municipality, your mayor Fader actually sits on as your representative on our board. If there's something that you want us to do as far as lobbying, you just let your mayor know. He will let us know, and we will lobby. at this point, it's sort of where it sits. And we have a similar situation, and I can speak freely because, the other members, they may not be able to speak freely, but I can speak freely and say that, like in Bow Island, for any of you who are familiar with that situation there and the current bypass, and the community does not want that bypass, and there's a negotiation going on right now, but we're not involved in doing any of that lobbying now yet because it's still at the grassroots between the municipality and the Department of Transportation. So when you're ready to have us come in and start pushing, you just go ahead and you do that. That's what I'm here for.
If I could just chime in here. I think part of the problem is that we continue to see rotation through the Alberta Transportation Department as far as ministers go. I'm not really certain how many ministers I've seen sitting in that chair since I've been elected 8 years ago, but there has been numerous. Every opportunity that I get to speak with the ministers, I always bring Highway 3 forward. And first and foremost is the Fort Mccloud's project, which is shovel ready, the only project out of the list that's ready to go. And the province continues to put funding into northern Alberta roads and seems to totally forget about anything in the south. So we do have a new minister, and had a lot of conversation with her, and she does see the value in expanding and twinning Highway 3. I'm sure like you, I was very disappointed when the budget came out that there wasn't any allocated funding for any projects. But she continues to tell me that they are working towards getting funding out here. But we definitely support that item number 4 on the list, and would encourage each and every one of you, along with the mayor, to continue to lobby the government and bend their ear and get them to finally, hopefully soon, agree that funding is important and move that project forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? I was curious if you can give us a quick update on the Connie functional study. Is there progress being made on that study?
Again, I guess I'll speak freely and say that there is some internal Connie structure, organizational stuff going on, and it appears that that has potentially stalled out any forward momentum we were making. So, I mean, I say we, but I mean Department of Transportation. So I do understand that the terms of reference were reviewed by council, and they were entering into the comment stage on negotiations on the terms of reference. But I believe that came to a stop recently. So that's my most recent update, and I look forward to actually hearing maybe more of that on Friday at the AGM.
Very good. Any other thoughts, comments from your side, Victoria or Blair?
Just thank you very much for everyone allowing us to present, and we're here for you. And if you want to have us back, we'll come back every year and give you an update on what we're doing, whatever you like, okay?
Thank you so much, both of you, and wish you the best and your association. All right, thank you. All right. Next portion of our meeting is public hearings, of which we have 2 tonight. And so we will ask a motion from council to open the public hearing for Bylaw 1954 to start, which is a land use bylaw rezone from commercial central to residential. Is anyone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Edwards makes a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. The public hearing is open, and I will ask our planner, Gavin Scott, to introduce this bylaw to us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bylaw 1954 is before you, requesting your zoning from commercial central to residential. This is in your downtown historic area. And it was identified and shown to Fraser Shaw as a request for his response to this, and he had no concerns. The building does show up on old aerial photographs as being there when some of the first buildings were going into your downtown. As in your report, you'll see that this building was at one point residential before, and then at a certain period was converted to a hair salon and subsequently rezoned to commercial. This request is to go back to that residential zoning. We've had no written letters or submittals or phone calls regarding this matter, and this evening the recommendation is to move forward with second and third reading.
All right. Being this is a public hearing for bylaw 1954, is there anyone wishing to speak for or against this bylaw? I'll ask again, anyone wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1954? If none, I will request a motion from council to close the public hearing for bylaw 1954. Councillor Monteith makes a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Now requesting a motion from council to open the public hearing for bylaw 1955, which is a land use bylaw rezone from public institutional to residential multi-unit. Councillor Van Hagwas makes that motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And I'll again ask our planner, Gavin Scott, to introduce this bylaw to us.
Thank you once again. Bylaw 1955 is an amendment from public institutional to a residential multi-unit. The location is lot 18 and a portion of lot 17 within block 403 of Plan 92B. And this is a former church that has come under some disrepair. It is currently vacant. The purchaser of the land is seeking to go towards some residential development, but at this point has not made it known as to how many units he's seeking. The number of units is privy of MPC. MPC can add or delete as how many units the applicant comes forward with, depending on the nature of what's being presented, as well as any concerns of the citizenry. So at this point this evening, we've not again received any letters or comments for or against this application for rezoning, and staff recommendation is for approval.
Very well, thank you very much. Being this is a public hearing for bylaw 1955, I will open the floor to anyone wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1955. All right, I'll ask again, anyone wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1955, a land use bylaw amendment? And I'll ask a third time, anyone wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1955? If there is none, I will request a motion from council to close the public hearing for bylaw 1955. Councillor Dressler makes that motion. Call the question, on favor. Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, we will continue then to consideration of the delegation item we had and the two public hearings. We will start with our 2021 audit statements, and we will ask our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck, to introduce this item.
Good evening, Council. As you saw at the delegation, Calvin Scott from Avail presented our 2021 audited financial statements, clean opinion. We've done everything that we can, no management letter points. We're done for the year. So as I spoke with council before, we have moved some surplus into reserves just as a temporary measure, and administration will come back to council at a later date to discuss where we will allocate that 2021 surplus transfer. Other than that, the recommendation for tonight is that council approves the 2021 audited financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone prepared to make a motion as per the recommendations? Councillor Henniger makes the motion. Any further discussion or questions for administration? No debate. Then we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right, carrying on to item 2, Bylaw 1954, which is a land use bylaw amendment. Anyone prepared to make a motion for second reading on Bylaw 1954? Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any questions or discussion or questions for administration or our planner? Pretty straightforward amendment, I believe. If there is no discussion or questions or debate, I will call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Anyone prepared to make a motion for third reading of Bylaw 1954? Councillor Van Hagenbos makes the motion. Any questions, discussion, debate? Seeing none, we'll call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on then to item 3 under consideration, Bylaw 1955, Land Use Bylaw Amendment. Anyone prepared to make a motion for second reading of Bylaw 1955? Councillor Henniger makes a motion. Any questions for administration? Councillor Van Hagenbos has a question.
The current structures on there, and I'm not sure if this is a rezoning question or well, I think it is. The setbacks for the use we're rezoning it to aren't correct. So would that get grandfathered in, or would they have to clean that up?
Yeah, so with any rezoning, the zone that you're going to, you'd have to comply with the setbacks or request waivers at the point that you look towards the development. So the zoning process itself doesn't necessarily equate to your granting of such required setbacks, but it would have to be addressed by the MPC when this comes forward.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for administration? I was going to ask from a planner's perspective, this would be consistent, public institutional, changing it to multi-unit based on where it is. There's no concerns from a planner's perspective.
Yeah, we recently had a 16 unit or a 12 unit come up. That was mid-block. This is corner. It is in with a walkable distance to the downtown and other amenities, so it does meet your land use bylaw requirements for those. Within a certain distance of a park, all those things are in the land use bylaw. That is part of the consideration that MPC would also be looking at as to how many units are appropriate here. So in the section for the land use bylaw, it has a list of things that they would look for as to the appropriateness of the density.
Very well, thank you. All right, any other questions? No debate. Then we'll call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Anyone prepared to make a motion for third reading of Bylaw 1955? Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any questions? If there's no debate, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. All right, carrying on then to new business. We have a Bylaw 1956, which is a land use bylaw rezone amendment, and I will have to declare a pecuniary interest in this item, so I will excuse myself and pass it over to our Deputy Mayor, Warner Dressler.
Okay, Your Worship, thank you very much. Sorry. It's 1956, correct? All right. Sorry, just give their submission first there for first reading. I'm just waiting for it. So bylaw 1956. So its intent proposed for bylaw 1956 is to redesignate lands legally described in Lot 5, Lot 326, Plan 92B within the southwest quarter section of 12 Township Road 9, Range Road 226, west of the 4th Meridian, from residential manufactured home to residential R. And whereas the lands would be subject of this proposed redesignation as shown on the map in Schedule A. So can I have a motion to open this, please? Or Gavin, sorry. Let Gavin talk first. Sorry, my apologies.
It's okay if you take half my lines, then I don't have to speak as much, right? So this bylaw 1956 is before you with a request to move from manufactured home to residential R. It has a proposal for a duplex to come up before the MPC at some point, so the zoning was necessary to move that forward. The recommendation this evening is to set your public hearing to April 25th at 7 p.m. And beyond that, I think if you had some minor questions, I'd be ready to answer them. Otherwise, ready to move first reading. Thanks.
Just also there too, in the background, the property is currently vacant. The owner wishes to rezone to allow for the use currently not allowed on its existing zoning. So we'd like to do first reading of this. So can I have a motion from council? And for the public hearing, correction? Councillor Edwards would like to make that motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, thank you. Next order of business is new business item 2, bylaw 1952, which is a waste management bylaw. And we'll ask our Director of Operations, Agent Pedro, to speak to this.
Good evening, Council. You have to listen to me for the next little bit. So bylaw 1952 is the new waste management bylaw. So as part of our new waste management program, we needed to update the old bylaw, which has been in place since 2014. This new bylaw does align with the new level of service we're looking to provide. Council has seen this bylaw before. There were some minor changes to it, just more so to clean things up. We did now include the schedule of the rates and the schedule for the actual pickup collection days as well. And we tried to make it as fairly straightforward as possible. It really defines what the residential collection is going to be, what the town's responsibilities are for that, what the landowner's responsibility for that is as well. And we did really try to identify the commercial, industrial, institutional section in there as well to make that clear to those landowners as well. Other than that, there's nothing groundbreaking in it. We do also identify all the other town collection in there. So the town cleanup, e-waste, those types of programs as well. So tonight we are asking that council give first reading to this bylaw and then advertise for public hearing on April 11th.
Very good, thank you. Is anyone prepared to make a motion as per the recommendation? Councillor Monteith makes the motion. Any questions for administration? Councillor Dressler has a question.
Just for clarification, Adrian, I just wanted to ask on your Schedule D, I believe you put in there for prohibited items into our waste. So, and I know you've quoted it to the Environmental Protection Act and Enhancement Act. So is there going to be also just for layman's, for the public as well, some more information on that so that any household waste that is actually prohibited stuff that if they're doing a reno is not going into their waste?
So just to clarify, clarification in terms of Schedule D, or,
Oh, sorry, I went back and then I went there for your prohibited items.
yeah,
Which is 17.0 on the bylaw itself. You've got biomedical waste control.
yeah.
And then you have all that stuff there. And so I just wanted to make sure because restaurants and or businesses that are doing certain things just to ensure that that stuff is not going into the waste. The more of a clear defined on what, just to kind of give more of an educational, or not educational, but more defined as to what. Because when you say biomedical waste, defined in the waste control regulation,
Yeah, that would be more applicable to something like the health center, not so much restaurants. So, yeah, I mean,
right? But somebody that might be a diabetic and might just think that that's appropriate to throw away the
Potentially,
canister in the garbage.
yeah, we can look at that and see if there's any way to make that more clear. Would suggest that most people,
Could be in the
Could look that up.
definitions or something too.
right?
Yeah, I know there was before with the garbage, there was always an issue with sanitation workers being pricked or poked by needles and then of course finding out whether or not if the person was diabetic, going through that whole murmuring is just also to define it that, that this is not where you're supposed to be putting it. You should be disposing it at the hospital or at a proper facility.
Councillor Monteith?
I think we have to be careful that we don't overwhelm people with information, because then they're going to be following nothing. So I think we really need to be careful on that.
The other thing too is that needles and things are contained in the prohibited materials list on Schedule D. So some of that stuff has already been expanded on and is in more general terminology within Schedule D and not legislative mumbo jumbo. It's much easier to read and understand what exactly we mean by prohibited materials.
Okay, any other questions regarding the substance of the bylaw before it goes to the public hearing? Based on your submission, I don't believe there was, you outlined quite clearly what was adjusted in the bylaw, which was good to see. Just adding definitions, clarifications, and the changes based on the change to service. I see no issue with what's been done. Councillor Van Heijbos, question?
9.1 on the commercial. Yeah, regarding commercial. I'm not sure if it is mentioned on the residential, but it states that once per year, over the course of 1 week, town staff will collect any loose yard waste that is placed within the alleys. All material must be compostable and not placed in any plastic bags or containers. I see a problem here. It could become a problem. People are gonna say, oh yeah, well, they're coming in 51 weeks to pick this up. I know we've had discussion about alley cleanup previously, and we continue to fund it and we continue to do it. I personally have a bit of an issue with that altogether, but that's irrelevant of this bylaw. I really think this can get interpreted the wrong way. And I'm just open for a little bit of a discussion on it, and if we can somehow change the wording, or, I don't know, I'm just a little torn with how it's worded.
So is it more so an issue with not placement in bags or containers?
You're talking 9.0, right?
Correct, yeah. This isn't changing from the old bylaw, correct? Like, what's the wording? Is there a change in the wording from the old bylaw?
I don't believe this, I'd have to look that up. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Because if the wording isn't changed, other than people now seeing this bylaw in front of them and actually seeing that they can do this, whereas lots of residents have been doing this, I don't think we're gonna see too big of a change. But if the wording has changed, and I guess I should have done a bit of homework on that or made the request earlier, but I'm just wondering if this really opens up this back alley cleanup to a year-round event with a once annual cleanup versus us advertising via utility bills or online that we're actually doing this. I just feel like we're gonna have back alleys that are gonna be, restricted due to compost piles or branches or everything. I don't know how we could word it differently, but I see this being a bit of an issue.
Right, so I see your point. I guess the sort of the vagueness over the time of year perhaps is an issue. Right, so maybe,
Correct? Yeah.
right, focusing that in.
Doesn't 9.4 take care of that issue though? Because it says all yard waste generated outside of this program must be taken by the resident to the town's compost area, which then closes the window that if they don't have their yard waste out for that week, once that week is over, we're then well within our rights to use our unsightly bylaw and to get the alleyways cleaned up.
Do we want to spend all that time enforcing that? Like, I think if you put a date that the cleanup's going to be June something, so you can put your stuff out a week ahead of time, that would be fine, and it's inappropriate any other time.
Yeah, I think that's what 9.4 is saying.
It's not giving a timeline, though.
It says outside of the,
Yeah, but what does the program say? It doesn't say when you can put it out.
It's per year over the course of 1 week.
Go ahead, Adrian.
I was gonna say that, so this is generally at the same time every year. I would hesitate to put a specific date on it. I think we can narrow it down to putting a general time of year, perhaps a month, or it typically takes place kind of at the after May long weekend. So if we can make it more specific in that sense, I wouldn't necessarily attach a specific date though.
I think bottom line, we want to detail that we don't want our back alleys to be used as a collection staging area for the one annual cleanup, I think is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. If we put more, because we've never enforced, and I doubt we ever will in regards to this, and I guess I don't control that enforcement aspect, so who knows? But if we just communicate what is acceptable, because we communicate what we're doing, but we should communicate what's not acceptable, because we do that on many other things. You can't have garbage over the brim, or you can't have it in non-compostable bags. So I think we just need to communicate that anything outside of that 1 week collection period is not acceptable. And this speaks to residential and commercial, because do we specify that this is strictly residential? I don't see how this serves a purpose in the commercial side, but you never know, right? It's just...
So whatever's in the alleys, our guys will pick up if it's any sort of compostable material. So hard to say whether some of it's from businesses or not. And I wouldn't think that would be very likely.
Okay, so the motion for first reading of bylaw 1952 is on the floor. I think from now till second hearing, we would request council submit any questions, correct, Adrian? Regarding this bylaw to you for consideration before we go to second reading?
For sure, and we can look at that wording before second reading as well.
Yeah. And I assume this bylaw, how is it vetted practically so that we know it's gonna function well within the community? Is that something that needs to happen? Or is that administration?
Vetted in terms of legal opinion?
No, just practically speaking, if someone that doesn't know anything about our garbage, will they be able to read through this and get a good idea of how it functions?
That's the intent, hopefully. Yeah, we tried to make it as clear as possible.
Very good.
We did have, we looked at other examples, of course. And then I did actually run this by Brownlee as well, so enforceability wise, we're okay there.
Okay.
The different parts, I think, makes it fairly easy to follow. I was playing around with the idea of putting it in a table of contents, given the length, so we might add that for prior to second reading as well, so.
All right, being the motion for bylaw 952 for first reading and the public hearing is on the floor, is there any other questions for administration? Councilor Venables?
This is an easy one. Could we get a copy of the previous bylaw sent to us, or myself? Yeah. Fair enough.
Very good. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Dressler?
Just want to point out too, in regards to the waste cleanup program, this does cater to those that have a back alley. It does not cater to those who have only just curbside on the frontage. So are we going to do something for those who would like to dispose of their materials and are compostable? Because again, where we're looking at it is this is only for residents that have a back lane, not with just frontage where it's curbside pickup.
I'd have to ask our guys about that one. I'm not exactly sure if people who don't have back alleys have placed it in the front. If they have, I'm sure we would have picked it up, but I can confirm that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item 3, which is the land sale item. And then we'll have our Director of Operations, Agent Pedro, speak to this one.
Good evening again. So the town has been approached by Falcon Industries with an offer to purchase 2 pieces of property adjacent to them. One being Lot 12, Block 31, Plan 191-0152, and the other is Block OT, Plan 1327JK. Falcon has offered to purchase both these properties for $130,000. These are below market value, so there is a process, a 60-day advertising process, and it does go out publicly as per the MGA. Our recommendation is that council approve the purchase offer of $130,000 and proceed with that advertising process as per the MGA.
Very good. Anyone prepared to make a motion on the recommendation? Councilor Dressler makes a motion as per the recommendation. Any other questions for administration? If there's no debate, then we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Our 4th item is a land sale listing, which we'll also have our Director of Operations, Adrian Petro, speak to it.
This is in keeping with our land initiative here. So the town has recently cleaned up 158 9th Street. So we need to include that on our land sale listing. We are asking that council approve adding it to that land sale listing for a lot price of $29,900. And this is the same lot price for the other lots in that area. We did get fortunate on this property. There was no asbestos found in it. We had to take about 8 different samples. We were quite concerned about it, but we did get fortunate and we were able to do the demo, and the site is completely clean now, so ready to sell.
Thank you very much. Anyone prepared to make a motion on the recommendation for this agenda item? Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any further questions for administration? Discussion? Councillor Vanaguas?
I'm just not quite getting my bearing here on the avenue. Has this been paved and curb and gutter put in on that stretch, or is it 9th east of 2nd Ave?
So yes, the aerial in your package is not updated. So the new infrastructure extends basically to the west property line of this parcel.
Okay.
So there is asphalt, curb and gutter all the way.
So the 3 surrounding lots, 1 to the east and the 2 to the north and northeast, are also listed at this time? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. So motion is on the floor. Is there any further discussion? If there is none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item 5, a policy item for our bulk water fill station, and the Director of Operations, Agent Pedro, would like to speak to this.
So council has before you operations policy number 12. We are asking that council accept this policy as information. It is an administrative policy. It does outline some policies and procedures for the new bulk water fill station. We are live and open to the public, and so we need to just set some criteria in terms of how it works, what the rate is going to be, which is reflected in the water utility services bylaw as well. So this just clarifies how everything works for that piece of infrastructure.
Very well. Is anyone prepared to make a motion to accept this policy as information? Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any questions on the policy? Pretty straightforward policy, I would say. If there's no discussion, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Going on to item 6, we'll ask our Director of Operations to speak to the airport rental policy.
So council has before you operations policy 13. This is the airport event rental policy. We felt like we needed to put this in place because there has been an increasing amount of requests to use the airport for special events. There was sort of an internal metric in terms of what those restrictions would be, including number of days that the airport could be utilized for those events. Because we're having more requests, we need something more formal as our guidelines and procedures for that. The important part of this policy is that we've attached maximum number of days for usage. Total maximum for the year is 50 rental days. And then there's a maximum on weekend days of 16. So we're going to see how that goes and then adjust as necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone prepared to make a motion as per the recommendation to accept this policy as information? Councillor Hanniger makes the motion. Any questions for administration on this policy? No debate, no discussion. We'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, moving on to item 7. The MD of Willow Creek Strategic Plan, and we'll ask our CAO, Anthony Burdett, to speak to this one.
Good evening, Council. Thank you. The MD of Willow Creek has submitted their strategic plan, their 2022-2026 to 2026 strategic plan to us, and attached with a letter that I will read. It says, the Council of the Municipal District of Willow Creek, number 26, has engaged over the past 4 months in reviewing multiple policies and plans. One significant matter that has been undertaken is a review of the MD of Willow Creek strategic plan. As part of the review of this plan, the Council is seeking feedback from stakeholders. As such, please find the attached municipal district plan, and it goes on to say that they are interested in our comments. And so we're bringing this forward to you today as we are stakeholders and have many similar interests with the MD of Willow Creek, and asking council that if they have comments, feedback, or review for the municipal district of Willow Creek, that we can compile that and send that to them.
Very good, thank you. I think this is the first time we've been asked to comment on another municipality's strategic plan, which I think is not a bad thing at all. So we definitely want to acknowledge and appreciate the MD for taking that step. It's a little bit hard to comment exactly on what we would like to or not see in it, but is there anything administration considered as they read through it that would maybe perhaps align with some of the projects we're currently working on ourselves?
Yeah, so upon review of the MD strategic plan, generally administration felt that their objectives were in line with our types of objectives and their priorities, building community, looking for strategic or economic development, and the ones that we really like to see is their commitment to working with other governments and other groups, as we want a healthy relationship with our neighbors. Throughout the plan, it's very detailed and specific, and so they have a lot of metrics and gauges to gauge their success, and so it's a good read to see what the MD will be up to in the next while with their specific goals and metrics. And yeah, overall, generally, I think it speaks well to our relationship and our future with the MD. And other than that, I don't have a whole lot of other comments for their plan.
Very good. Did they request a time as to when feedback should be received? We got this about a month ago, right? So I'm assuming they will want this.
Yeah, they didn't give us any deadlines, but you'd think sooner rather than later.
Okay. Any questions from council? Comments? Councilor Dressler, sorry.
Yes, I did. I know on the bottom of their strategic plan, they did discuss about the ambulance service and working with AHS on providing that service. That has not, we've just had that discussion on our previous, but haven't seen or heard much more conversation in regards to this. So I kind of would like to know more where they're going with this, if they say that they want to have it done by the end of 2022, because if we are a stakeholder, there should be an open conversation that we are aware of it, especially our community.
Very good. Councilor Edwards?
I'm just want to clarify that the IDP and all that stuff that we've been working on for years that we finally got passed, does that not also need to be integrated into their land use bylaw and their MDP? Because in my opinion, we want to suggest to them that that might also be something as a strategic priority as far as keeping their governance processes current. Because if it's not in those documents, then the NRCB won't recognize some of the agreements that we've made. That's what I'm recalling. I could be totally wrong.
Yep, you're 100% correct. It does need to be reflected in their MDP, and then for it to actually be valid in the NRCB's eyes. From our understanding, the MD's planner is going to be working on that pretty quickly to get that in place. So ideally, it
Low-hanging fruit for the MD of Willow Creek to put in their strategic plan, but would benefit all of the communities that they've been working with. So I don't know if that's a suggestion to put forward, but.
Yeah, there's of interest was the waste energy project. I know some of the MD councillors have been really looking at that, and I think that's something that we could definitely see some collaboration on. I think their thoughts are that we're at some point we need another alternative to landfills, and so that would be one that I thought was of interest that we could and definitely encourage support for. Highway 3, we came up before. I think it's, I don't think it would hurt to encourage them to be more actively involved in Highway 3 because it does run through their municipality for quite some time. I know it's all twinned for the most part within the MD, but it's still part of building up the region. Housing, crime, I think those are two big items. I know they have some on there with crime, but how we can perhaps collaborate more. I know they're working on their rural, what do they call it? Crime Watch. But how we could, so I think we all have an invested interest to make sure crime is reduced and housing too. I know as their farm community grows, they need more and more housing opportunities, and I think that's something we could use some support from them on, or the other way around.
Sorry, Your Worship. They're just below on their one of their key initiatives. It is support rural crime watch within their municipality. So, I would be nice to have actually one of their members of the council attend our crime prevention advisory committee. We only have just members of their community that are representing the rural crime watch. So,
Councillor Monteith?
I think we have to be careful about what we want to see in their strategic plan, because I'm sure if they came up with a list of 5 or 10 things for our strategic plan, we might get our backup. So I think we have to be careful in how we view this, because I'm not sure I want to speak for what I think the MD should do. I think the MD needs to speak for what they need to do. So I think we really need to be careful on that.
Oh, absolutely. How we word. They're asking for feedback, and I think yeah, I think it's, in some ways it's an opportunity to how we can collaborate more on things together. Not so much how we tell them what to do, but more how we can together work on priorities that can advance our region more. So definitely communication, don't want to be, this is what you need in it, but these are areas that I think we can work on together. But without having our strategic plan complete, it's a little bit hard to fully comment as well. Very good. So those are some comments. Any other comments on that? All right. So Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was just saying first that I think this is a good practice for us to review their strategic plan as we go into the development of our strategic plan, and kind of focusing on our priorities and how the MD can help play into some of our goals as well. And that collaboration piece is obviously very important. As far as responding to the MD, I mean, I can take the comments and concerns raised today and draft a letter, pass it by council to see if you guys are in agreement, and we can give them some feedback that way.
Perhaps it would be good to have a conversation with their CAO first and just ask what he thinks would be an acceptable form of communication, if any, and see how you would like to see that from us. Cool. Well, I don't know that we need a motion on this for now, right? You have some comments and we'll go from there. All right, so we have 2 new business items that were added, and we'll ask Councillor Dressler to speak to the AAPG item.
thank you, Your Worship. As Council, you appointed me on to the Association of Police Governance as a municipality, as an associate member. The AAPG is having a conference in St. Albert which I wish to attend. AAPG is continuing to work together with the province currently right now on reestablishing our police act. There are a lot of stakeholders that are not part of AAPG, which should have, especially since the province has still not given proper information on whether or not for a provincial police force if they wish to change it. And again, this is also part of where Alert program is in part, where our former CAO, Susan, correction, Sue Keenan was a part of, which is also a great initiative that works with our community. And again, it also too works with making sure that our views within our community and within our joint membership with our Indigenous communities, both Piikani and Kainai, are met, working with their communications on their tribal police. Were there any questions in regards to the conference?
Do we have details or proposed motion to pass in terms of cost, or is it a 2 weeks? Is it a day conference, 2 days?
Sorry, Your Worship, it's 2 days. It's a Friday and a Saturday.
Okay.
I was looking through to see if it was added on, because I did send out the complete package. It is a 2-day conference. I would only ask for a 1-night stay. Just travel up, stay the 1 night, and then travel back. Some others are flying. I wish not to fly. I would rather drive to St. Albert. So, and of course, Lisa advised me there that there would be a request just for fuel expenditure and then for the hotel. I am asked as part of the association for new members to do a session with them in regards to that, where I will be doing a PowerPoint presentation from AAPG for new members joining into the group.
Okay. So estimated value, I think, is 1 night's travel and time and food and such.
A lot of that is actually also covered by AAPG already with our membership. Yes, Your Worship. So it would just be my hotel and travel.
Okay. All right. Anyone prepared to make a motion to approve Councillor Dressler's attendance at the AAPG conference for a 2-day conference, 1 night of accommodation, and travel expense to and from? Anyone prepared to make the motion? Councillor Monteith makes the motion. Any further questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council.
All right, item 9 is an added item tonight, and we have before us a letter that we are requesting council's a motion from council to approve for us to be able to issue to our fellow council member, Councillor Van Hangbos. And I think I'll read it first and then request a motion from council, and we can have some other discussion there. So this is addressed to Councillor Van Hangbos. It's a letter of reprimand, breach of conduct, Council Code of Conduct bylaw. Dear Marco, further to the resolution of Council passed on February 24th, 2022, I am writing to express Council's grave concerns about your recent behavior. Our citizens expect the highest standards of conduct from the members it elects to Council for the town of Fort Macleod. As a member of Town Council, you are a public figure, and your words and actions reflect not only on yourself, but also on Council as a whole and the town at large. The Council Code of Conduct's bylaw states, in part 5.1, members shall, item D, arrange their private affairs and conduct themselves in a manner that promotes public confidence and will bear close public scrutiny. And 8.1, members shall uphold the law established by the Parliament of Canada and the Legislature of Alberta and the bylaws, policies, and procedures adopted by Council. Additionally, you are elected to a position of public trust and as such have a duty to act in good faith and in the best interests of the town of Fort Macleod at all times. Provincial and even national media reports quote you as being one of the organizers and a spokesperson of the Coots border blockade and identify you as being a town councillor in Fort Macleod. Your admitted and very public involvement with the Coots border blockade is in direct violation of your obligations under the Council Code of Conduct Bylaw. To be clear, Council respects the right of peaceful protest, but that does not extend to organizing an illegal blockade of a highway and border crossing that halted international travel and trade for over 2 weeks and disrupted our municipal neighbor, the village of Coots. Simply put, Council does not tolerate such behavior. In accordance with Council direction, this letter is being issued to you as a formal letter of reprimand and will be posted publicly on the town's website for purposes of accountability and transparency. Any further instance of unacceptable behavior by you, as deemed unacceptable by the Council Code of Conduct Bylaw, may result in further sanction in accordance with this bylaw or such other remedy as may be available under statute or the common law. Moving forward, I trust you will ensure your conduct is without fault and that as councillor, you will focus your energy and attention on serving the welfare and interests of the town of Fort Macleod. Yours truly, Brent Vader, Mayor, Town of Fort Macleod, and the members of council. So this time I'd probably request a motion from council to issue this letter of reprimand and we'll proceed accordingly. Councillor Edwards makes a motion. Any other discussion or comments? I know this is the first time as mayor that we've had to issue any formal reprimand based on our council code of conduct bylaw. It's never a pleasant thing to be able to do. It's something that the code of conduct bylaw there is there for a reason, to hold each other accountable. And this is part of that process. We definitely appreciate and value the contributions fellow councillor Thang Haibos has contributed to the town of Fort Macleod. This is an area where council felt there needed to be some accountability on. Right, if there is no other comments or questions, then we will call the motion to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, council. All right, our next order of business is an in-camera item and for one land item. So we'll call for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Henniger makes a motion. Councillor Van Hagenbos is declaring a pecuniary interest, so you will be leaving the meeting at this time. And we will be calling for a motion, or sorry, call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.